Welcome, everyone. I'm just blessed to have my friend, Matt Tiscareno. I want to say more so, he he's an older brother to me, and it's a new feeling um, being in a relationship with him because he makes me feel safe. And I think he may notice this when I'm around him and his family. I don't know how to function because most of my life I've always been defensive and having to always prove myself. Um, but he accepts me as is, and then it's really tough for me. And I'm always a giver, but he's teaching me how to receive. His family, being able to be around him and his family, eating together, playing games, even playing games, that's something new. Like I don't know how to function. And I'm like uh fidgeting, going for walks, watching baseball together. It's something I've always wanted to do growing up as a kid, and coming to America, but I never got to experience that. But Matt has allowed me to share those moments with his family. And so um, it's just a unique situation for those of you that may know me personally, in different spaces. You see my persona always um, directing, facilitating something. Um, and when around Matt and his family, I'm like completely submissive. And I'm just blessed. I'm just so blessed. It's a new world for me. And someone who makes me feel this safe, um, I'm wondering, what's it like to be him? Um, why why is he and his family so wonderful? What makes them tick? And so I would like I invited him on here to share with the rest of the world, not being greedy. And he has this wonderful light. And so you can't keep him under the blanket, right? And so thank you, Matt, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. As a prerequisite
Well,
for as a
oh, I,
prerequisite.
I'm just blessed and privileged to hear you say such kind things about me. And we really love you, Robert, and are always glad to have you around with us. And I've been really particularly blessed as you've been mentoring one of my kids as a writer, and lots of just your conversation is such a blessing to us as well. It's a two-way street.
Thank you, Matt. As one of the prerequisites for coming on, is a show and tell. Favorite piece of merch, t-shirt, shirt, but you have something special to share with us.
Yeah, so Robert saw me wearing this earlier today. This is a baseball hat, and sorry if some of you are fans of other teams, but I grew up in Southern California, and the Dodgers have been my favorite team since I was a kid. And in particular, it was something that I did with my dad. And this cap actually belonged to my dad. He wore it for decades. Um, and he passed away this summer of pancreatic cancer. It was a hard time, but there was also a lot that was beautiful. It's very complicated, and God is good. But anyway, reminds me of him, and I was actually it's kind of the first day today that I was just wearing it around
Mhm.
as I went and did things. Um, but yeah, it reminds me of him. It even has on the side the years that the Dodgers won the World Series, but it doesn't have 2020 because I think this cap is much older than that. So anyway, that's what I got.
Thank you so much. And so for those of you out there, if you see me in person and you see me rocking Dodgers gear, this is my pass, okay? This, my adoptive family has invited me into the community, so don't hate me, Giants fans. Okay, so baseball. What are you passionate about? Baseball. What else?
Mm. Well, I am passionate about, I guess, a lot of things. I mean, I have to say that Jesus and the gospel is the most important thing in my life.
Mm.
Being with my family and my church community is something that I really prioritize. Science and just the life of of the mind, and having a thoughtful approach to the world, including a thoughtful approach to Christianity and the gospel, is also really important to me. I am a scientist by vocation,
Mm,
and so talking to Christians about science, and sometimes talking to my fellow scientists about religion,
mm.
that's also something that is important to me, and that I, thought about a lot, and I would say I'm passionate about.
In regards to your passions, did you like growing up? I mean, did you grow up in the church? Also, did you grow up in the world of science? Obviously, you grew up around baseball, and then sorry, this multi-layered questions, and then each of
Sure.
those passions, when did you own them? When it was like it's not your culture, but this is yours.
Hmm. That's good. Okay, so baseball was something that my dad and I did from when I was a kid, and I have delved into the details of it since then, and continue to. So that's pretty long standing.
Mm,
I was raised in a Christian family, grew up in the church, but I definitely had stages of owning it as my own, especially through high school and college. Was pretty solidified, including in graduate school. So in my
mm,
early to mid 20s, it was a process from high school through my mid 20s to kind of test the links of my chain, and see whether I really believed them.
mm,
Um, and that process is never finished. Like, you don't just set it aside and say, okay, everything is fine, right? There's a combination of having convictions, but also having intellectual humility. Like, I believe that things are true, but I also understand that my ability to understand them is limited.
mm,
But I really do. So yeah, I guess you're saying, when did I own that as my own? In stages from high school through my mid 20s is when I really owned my faith
mm,
as my own. Science, I was kind of vaguely interested in math and science through high school, and
mhm.
then went to a science focused university and ended up majoring in planetary science, and so studying the solar system, including geology, physics, astronomy, and things like that. And um, sorry, my phone over there is ringing,
It's
but
okay.
let's see, stop that. Um, so yeah, that also, through taking classes and reading books, and again, a process of thinking through things, and understanding how to integrate that with the rest of my life, again, was something I felt pretty comfortable with by my
Mm.
mid 20s. Um, yeah, does that answer?
Yeah,
Did I get?
yeah. How'd you get started into planetary science? Like, what
Hmm.
piqued your curiosity, and
So I
how'd
started,
you commit to it? Yeah.
yeah, so I started college not really knowing what I wanted to do.
Mm,
I knew that math and science was something that I was good at and kind of enjoyed, so I started majoring in physics because I didn't have any better idea. Um, and then about almost exactly halfway through my college career, the summer after my sophomore year,
mm,
two things happened. I did a summer research project with a researcher who had been part of the Voyager team and was part of the Galileo team at the time. So I actually, I had some contact with that. Actually, earlier than that, my freshman year, I took an elective class on the physics of the solar system, which really opened my eyes to the idea that the solar system can be a playground for physics. I also saw, quantum mechanics looming on the horizon, which was so abstract and mathematical. And, I don't mind some math, but I like to be able to, with at least in my mind's eye, see what I'm doing physics on. So I kind of pivoted away from, particle physics or quantum mechanics or anything like that, and towards the solar system as something that I can really do physics and see what I'm doing. So I ended up changing my major, ended up taking a lot of geology classes, which I really enjoyed.
wow.
And then when I was getting ready to graduate, I applied to graduate school in planetary science and got in, and I just have kept doing it. And no one has ever told me that I had to stop and find a different job. So I continue doing a job that I love, and I'm very blessed to have that.
That's that's wonderful. Um, is there, do you have like a story about a pivotal moment in your life, or are there a couple things that that happened to you that shaped who you are right now?
Oh, that's a big question. Um, Gosh, let's say, and there's a lot of things that I could mention. The thing that comes to
Mm,
mind actually was in 2004 we moved because my wife and I both finished graduate school, and I got a job
mm,
working at a university in upstate New York. And so we had to find a new church in the new town,
mm,
and just we were kind of looking through the phone book really, and sent an email to a pastor who sent an email back, and I liked what he had to say, and we really like the very first Sunday we were there. In fact, I went there before we even moved. I went there looking for apartments and went to church there
mm,
that Sunday, and
wow,
it just was the place that we ended up.
mm,
And I had not been part of that denomination before, but I continue to be part of that denomination now. And I
wow,
mean, not that it's the perfect denomination. I mean, if you join the perfect church, if you've ever find the perfect church, don't join it because you'll ruin it. It's it it has its pluses and its minuses, but I
yeah,
really think that it's a beautiful
mm,
approach to the gospel, and particularly the pastor of the church in New York
mm,
State that we spent 11 years living there, and he became really a mentor to me, not only in how to think about the Bible, but how to
yeah,
think about ministry and other people, and how to have a pastor's heart towards other people. Um, so, I've had a lot of relationships, but that's just
mm.
one that comes to mind as the Lord knew what I needed and steered me in that direction, and I didn't even know what was going on until years later, and then knew to be very thankful for it.
In regards to making choices or solving problems, be it finding a church, um, or even changing your major, how do you solve problems? How do you determine like what is true? Because, and yeah, I think this is a really important question that I hope you can answer for us because I know I come to you and your family for a lot of advice.
Well, I think the book of Proverbs says something like, there in many counselors there's wisdom. So you know don't I would not just like pray and feel my heart going in a certain direction and assume that that must be right. In fact, I've had periods in my life where I've tried proceeding that way,
Hmm.
and it usually doesn't turn out to be right. I think better it definitely do pray.
Yeah.
Definitely ask the Lord for wisdom, but be open to the possibility that that wisdom will come to you through circumstances.
Hmm. Yeah.
If opportunities close and other opportunities open, um, you can take that as some guidance, but also be prepared for the Lord's guidance to come to you through the voice of your friends,
Hmm.
especially your Christian sisters and brothers, but maybe even others.
Yeah.
um, Wisdom can come to us from many directions, and all of us need it. It's not Jesus and me under a tree. We all need each other. We are
Mm.
followers of God as part of community.
What does in your work right now, what does the future of your field look like? Is there anything exciting happening?
Um, sure. I mean, so I work in planetary science, so
Mm,
there's always some kind of NASA spacecraft mission to another planet that's cooking up somewhere. I was privileged for many years to be part of the Cassini science team. That mission ended in 2017, but that was the orbiter of Saturn. That's the one that I've had the most direct involvement with.
wow.
Um, so that's not new and upcoming anymore, but it used to be. Um, the James Webb Space Telescope is doing really amazing things.
Yeah.
Like there are, I'm part of some teams that are, among hundreds of teams that are trying to use the observatory to do some science. But like, there are, tiny moons in the outer, around Saturn or,
Hmm.
or Uranus, where With other telescopes, it's a question of, can you even detect them from Earth or not? And with James Webb Space Telescope, you have to be careful. The telescope's going to saturate on those moons, like it's going to blow out the detector because it's so bright. I mean, it's amazing. The just the technology that's been developed. There's a a car-sized drone that's going to be flying on a moon of Saturn in the next decade. There's a spacecraft that's going to go and fly past the moon of Jupiter called Europa, where there might be oceans underneath the
Yeah.
ice, possibility of having a habitable environment there. There's lots of cool stuff in the works, and some friends of mine are actually part of those
Wow.
science teams. I personally am not, but it's exciting things.
Yeah. I think that's an understatement. That's really exciting. In regards to, I don't like using the word failure, maybe setbacks or stumbling blocks. How do you turn um those situations into stepping stones?
Hmm. Well, yeah. So failure is part of life.
Mm,
I don't think we should shy away from the word
yeah. Mm,
um, because we're human and we make mistakes. That's part of the nature of being human. Um, if we really understand the grace of God and if we really understand the wisdom of God, then we should never be in despair
mm,
about mistakes we've made or even deliberately wrong things we've done. Um, God always has a plan uh, that is for our good and for our salvation. That doesn't mean that everything that happens is an objectively good thing.
yeah.
I may make a mistake that has horrible consequences. I may commit a crime that, actively harms people. Like those are not good things. But I can always look up and see a path forward, moving towards Christ um, as His child.
Mm,
I can learn from the mistakes, learn to do better. I just want to feel like sharing that one kind of mistake that I sometimes make is that I feel like I know what other people need,
mm,
and all what they really need is just to listen to me, right? And so I just kind of charge forward and do things the way that I think that they should be
mm,
done. And I've had times when that didn't go very well.
yeah.
And it turned out that I didn't actually understand
Mm,
other people's lives as well as I thought I did. And so one
mm,
thing that so what do I do with that? Like, do I sit there in despair because I made this mistake and
mm,
caused this harm? No. I apologize, right? If there's restitution to be made, I look to do that. But
mm,
I also look for what can I learn? Well, for one thing, I can learn to be more careful to listen to other people and their wisdom before I charge forward and think that I know what's best.
mm,
So there's a combination of don't be in despair, but also don't get caught up in, your own arrogance.
mm.
Have humility and entrust yourself to Christ and move forward, learning from what's gone before.
Thank you. That's great. Um, thank you for the honesty too. Uh, for someone starting off, starting out into possibly planetary science, what piece of advice would you give to them trying to start out?
If they want to start out in planetary science,
Yes.
um, well, depending on what part of planetary science you want to go into,
Mm,
I think the first thing is don't be afraid of math.
mm,
Um, I think a lot of people feel like they can't do math, but what really is the problem is that the language that math is sometimes expressed in is something that they've had a hard time engaging with, or kind of the on ramp has been too steep. There are books out there that you can use to kind of use other uh, methods to get on board with math. It's important. It helps, and especially a lot of planetary science is quantitative. I guess there are some, maybe more geology focused
Mm. Oh,
paths into
yeah, yeah.
planetary science that maybe are not so math intensive. That's not what I personally have done, but or even chemistry. I think there's some math there, but maybe less so than if it's a more physics based. But anyway, don't be afraid of that. Look for help.
Mm.
Look for mentorship. And if that is what you're already interested in and you're moving forward with it, look for other people. Look for mentors, whether it's a teacher or a professor who can, not only give you knowledge, but that you can work with them in such a way that they can write you a letter of recommendation. I mean, I haven't mentioned this, but I actually
Mm.
run a summer internship program. So another thing that I sometimes tell people about is like, well, what kind of thing do you need to be moving forward in a
Yeah.
career? So the mentors are really important because letters of recommendation are really important for getting into, to some extent, into college, but especially into internship programs and into graduate school if you want to go in that direction. But forming relationships is also important because, we are not, machines at work. If you're a scientist, you're not a science creating machine. You're a
Mm.
human being with a vocation.
Mm.
And when it's not work time, you need to be in relationship with other people. You need to be in community because that is how people are healthy. That is really what
Mm.
God created us to do, was to be in community with each other. And that's true for scientists as well as for anybody. So look for peers and look for mentors, and make sure you're surrounding yourself with community as you go forward.
Matt, as you know, in Silicon Valley, we we like to be successful.
Hmm.
We have high standards for ourselves. How do you balance work and personal life? How do you not bring your work home?
I've been struggling with that, to be honest. But I've been, I've actually thought a lot in the past year. It actually was, gosh, now a year and a half ago, our pastors went through a sermon series through the book of Leviticus.
Mm. Yeah.
And, that's uh, it's sometimes a difficult book because there's a lot of there's a lot of rules and regulations. There's not a lot of story,
Yeah.
but our pastors really brought it out really well.
Mhm. Yeah.
And one thing that I came away thinking about was the Sabbath. God's people in the Old Testament had to order their lives very carefully in order to observe the Sabbath.
Mm.
They had
Yeah.
to organize the rest of their week so that they didn't need to cook on the Sabbath, that they didn't need to gather food on the Sabbath. Um, and I need to do better about that. I need to do a better job of organizing my work time so that I don't need to keep working on evenings and weekends. And I'm working on that. And sometimes it's hard to do that. Sometimes certain lines of work aren't really conducive to that. And we have to ask ourselves hard questions about what we're going to do about that. And I'm not going to tell anybody else what the right choice is. But I think a lot of people in my field will work 70 hours per week,
Wow.
and um, I think to some extent I am okay with not being at the forefront of everything that goes on in my profession, of just being one of many, kind of middle of the pack, if that's the consequence of me prioritizing time with my family and my church community and other things. um and even if that were to, like, and again, like I kind of said jokingly before, like, even if that meant that I wasn't able to stay in this field,
Mm.
uh, having a backup plan, I could go and teach somewhere. And I always had that in the back of my mind. Like it was never like my only possible way to be happy is to be a successful scientist. I always had that backup plan. I could just go and teach high school, maybe college, and if that's the direction my life went, I would be content.
Mm.
And so I didn't feel the need like I must, work and not be a whole person
Mm.
because I must be successful. I didn't have that orientation.
Yeah.
And God's given me some success regardless of that. And I'm content.
And piggybacking off of that, how do you define success? When do you give yourself a pat on the back?
Well, that can be a lot of things. Again, I mean, there's professional success, there's relational
Mm,
success, um, but I have had the privilege of being part of some exciting scientific results, that have, I think, helped me to keep my career. I've had proposals selected, and it's hard.
mm,
You always feel successful when NASA thinks it's worthwhile to give me some money to do some work. Like that's exciting. That certainly feels like success. Um, but uh, I heard somebody back when I was a teenager say something to the effect of, when I get to the end of my life and look back,
mm,
um, nothing is going to be important except my relationships with people, and serving the
mm,
Lord, who made me, and being, the person that He made me to be.
mm,
Nothing else is important in the end. And if doing my job and being successful as a scientist is part of how I become uh, the person that God has made me to be, then praise the Lord, and I will do that. But that's not what makes me successful as a person.
mm.
It's relationships, and it's following the Lord.
Um, do you have, can you name any one book that has significantly impacted you?
Mm. Well, I got to narrow it down to one.
Well,
Um,
well, you can name several because like in your family reads. So
mhm,
yeah, that's why I said
mhm.
you got some.
Um, well, until last year, I would have said that my favorite living author was Tim Keller.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
he actually was the same age as my dad and died of the same disease as my dad, uh, within a few months.
yeah.
Um, so that was, we mourn his passing, but also give thanks to God for his life. But Tim Keller wrote a number of books that I think were really formative for me. Um, The Reason for God
Mm,
is, a really, an intellectual foundation, for why it makes sense to be a Christian. But The Prodigal God is, I think, really foundational
huh,
in teaching us the heart of what it means to be a Christian. Especially, he talks about it's basically a meditation on the prodigal son, which is really the parable of two sons, and both of them are lost. The older brother and the younger brother, they're just lost in different ways.
yeah.
And for
Oh,
people like me who are more likely to be lost the way the older brother was lost, because I feel like I'm better and I feel like God owes me something,
mm,
and I feel like those people over there aren't good enough,
yeah,
and why am I not getting blessed the way I deserve to be? Like,
mm,
that's
wow.
a really amazing book, and really important. He also more recently wrote Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering, which really helped me in the past year. Um, and oh, I'm blanking on the name of the book that I'm reading now. It's about why the resurrection of Jesus gives us hope for life, and I'm blanking on the title, but you can find it. I think it maybe was his last book. Um, yeah, I'm just going to throw this out there. Another
Yeah.
book um, that came out, I think about 10, 15 years ago. Is by Wesley Hill, Washed and Waiting, and another book called Spiritual Friendship. Um, and those books were part of opening my eyes to the need for churches like mine to be more welcoming places for
Mm,
people whose experience of sexuality is is different from the mainstream. And you know, as an elder in my church, that's something that I have tried to talk about and
Mm,
tried to
mm,
be more tried to create an environment that is more welcoming, that is, you know, um, holding to biblical teaching, and also creating family environments and
mm.
creating community environments that are welcoming to everybody.
Um, in regards to another topic, or switch over to another topic. Uh, has AI affected your work at all? Or
Hmm. Not much yet, but it
okay.
probably will. Um, well, I mean, to machine learning
Mm,
is already a deal.
okay.
Um, and that's maybe a step lower than AI, so it's a bit more mature now. But you know, training a computer to you know, look through a million images and find certain characteristics, like you know,
Yeah.
that sort of thing is something that has intersected with my research work.
Mm,
You know, I've not even tried the thing like, oh, write me a paper about such and so. Like, that's
okay.
not a thing for me yet. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a big deal. And you know, and I have paid attention a little bit to people who have concerns about whether we're doing it responsibly, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
issues, but I don't know much about it really.
yeah. But that sounds really cool in regards to all the data collection that you could do and then it going through and distilling all that information for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential there, and it's already people are already doing it in the
Oh,
last
okay.
years. It's already started to be a thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh, how are you staying motivated? Or, I mean, yeah, how are you staying motivated at work?
Hmm. Um. Well, a lot of my work these days is managing a data archiving team and running
Mm,
a summer internship program, and then also, you know, trying to find time to do research projects like I did, you know, before I got into these other jobs. You know, so the data archiving I really
mm,
enjoy. I feel like, you know, I am helping to enable the whole community of scientists to do science by providing something that they need, which is not only access to data, but documentation and you know, support, and helping people to you know, find what they need, and understand and use what they find. So I enjoy feeling that that is doing something for the community. And then the summer internship program, we bring a dozen undergraduates to
mm,
the institute where I work every summer, and have it's a great, you know, um, it's just a great opportunity
yeah.
for me to interact with younger people,
Mm,
um, and also feel like I'm helping them along their path, and in some cases helping to put them onto a path
mm,
that they weren't securely on, towards a good career. And so I feel like those things do make a difference in the world, and don't just provide me with a living.
yeah,
So I'm grateful for that.
yeah. Are there any misconceptions people have about uh the work that you do?
Oh, sure. Um, oh yeah, I mean, name your misconception. Um, you know, I think the biggest one is what is science, right? Uh, Science is not a collection of answers to questions. Science is a method
Mm,
for thinking about questions. And you know, whether you're an atheist or whether you're a Christian, a lot of people think, well, the scientists are just, you know, the oracle that are giving us these answers. And some people say, you know, the answers that the scientists are giving us are wrong, and they're a conspiracy and blah blah. And other people say, well, the scientists are telling us that there is no God, and like that's like, either way, like there that's not right. Um, you know, science can't tell us whether or not God exists. That's another misconception. You know, yeah, and some people disagree with that, and there's some legitimate arguments, but my view is that the
mm,
proper definition of science um, is to be limited to physical causes and effect, to natural causes. And if you're thinking about supernatural causes, like they may be real, and of course,
mhm,
personally, I believe they are real. But when you're thinking about supernatural causes, when you're thinking about God, you're doing philosophy or you're doing theology. You're not doing science. And kind of the corollary to that is that science is not the sum total of human knowledge, right? There is,
Uh,
more to heaven and earth that is dreamt of in your philosophies, as Shakespeare said through Hamlet. Um, and that's really true. I can't prove to you through science that that you love your friend.
mm,
There's a lot that you can't prove.
mm,
And and faith is not just for religious people, right? I'm exercising faith right now by sitting on this stool. I've not done a detailed scientific analysis to prove to myself that this stool is going to hold me up. I'm trusting it, and we all do that sort of thing every day.
mm,
So faith is not just for religious people. Science is a tool that can help us to understand spiritual things, but can't really tell us whether they're
mm.
you know yes or no. And science is a method, it's not a set of answers.
Uh, how do you how do you handle criticism or disagreement?
Sometimes badly, but I try to always listen
Mm,
and and to understand that even if it's being given to me in anger or even if it's based on some misconceptions, there's a real viewpoint being given to me by a real person who is valuable because they're made in God's image, and try to listen to them and
mm.
glean what is valuable from it.
Is there anything that's happening, not just like in your field, but in your community, in your life right now that excites you?
Um, what I don't know. I'm in a new stage of life,
Mm,
in that, I've got two kids in college now, and two kids still in high school and middle school. So, as my youngest child has gotten older and older, I'm out of the diaper stage and out of, some younger stages, and kind of had a revelation that when I was a kid, I looked at my parents and they just seemed to have everything together. And
mm,
uh, it kind of hit me in the past year that my parents were probably as unsure and uh, worried and just like trying to hold it together with scotch tape as I feel like I'm doing now. And at the same time, my kids probably look at me now as if I had it all together as much as I used to look at my parents.
mm.
And that's really kind of sobering in both directions.
Yeah, yeah.
And it kind of makes me feel more connected, but
Mm,
also um, more humble,
mm.
but also excited
Yeah,
just to be kind of moving into new stages.
yeah, yeah. Are you when you encounter something new, how do you open up to it a little bit more?
When I encounter something new, how do I open up to it? I feel like I think this is a learned behavior. I don't think I used to do this, but when
Mm,
something unexpected happens, I kind of take a step back and put on my poker face and see what's going to develop.
mm,
Um, I feel like I've been doing that more in recent years than I used to. And I feel like it's helpful and it's a good posture, um, to kind of delay as much as possible the
mm.
reaction and the worry, and see how this new thing is going to develop and what it's going to be, and then try to think about it and engage with other people about it and see what's going to happen. I mean, that's a pretty generalized answer. I'm not sure if that's where you're going.
No, no, I like that. That's I think that's a perfect answer. It's simple, but it's profound because a lot of times we're so reactionary. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I mean, we think we're super proactive most of the time, but we're actually not because we don't have the full context of it, any
That's true.
situation. Um, what's a question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
People would ask themselves more often: is what I believe really true?
Mm,
Am I basing my life on
mm,
uh, assumptions that I haven't tested.
How do you see your work impacting your community in the long run? And again, it doesn't have to be work related.
Hmm. Um, well, I mean, I kind of talked about already, you know, as my vocational work that, am, helping people to, facilitate their research, and providing undergraduates with opportunities, and also other work, such as being part of leadership at the church,
Yeah.
just kind of trying to pour, you know, in my very fallible way, whatever God may have given me into other people's lives.
Mm,
And really, we're all just fellow travelers, as the saying is, one blind man telling another blind man where to find bread. Um, or one beggar telling another beggar how to find bread. Sorry,
no,
quoting that. Um, but I do feel excited and gratified to
mm.
just see myself and the people around me, progressing, and God teaching us things, and us walking through both, joyous and difficult circumstances together.
What's a dream or goal you're currently working towards right now, Matt?
Dream or goal that I am working towards? Oh, um, I think for churches to be better communities,
Mm,
to be more welcoming to people who are outside the mainstream, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's sexuality, whether it's race, other things. Um, Jesus said that our church community would be more fundamental to our lives than our nuclear families.
mm,
And in America, we don't often live that way. And I actually have found it hard not to live that way myself, even though I kind of have this ideal. Um, but I would like to be working towards a more holistic church community, and having it include everybody as chosen family to be really in each other's lives on a daily basis, and not just seeing each other on Sunday morning.
yeah. All right, we're down to the last four questions.
All right.
What is grief?
Hmm. Well, grief is part of lament, I think. I feel like I'd like to start that question by talking about lament,
Mm,
because lament is speaking honestly about the hard circumstance you're in and talking to God about it, um, and at the same time knowing that there's hope because God is good. And the Psalms give us a great blueprint for this. There's so many Psalms where, like, this trial and this grief and this circumstance is so hard, and then but God sustains me. God is faithful, and oftentimes, like, it's not because there's any change in the circumstances, it's
mm,
just a change of focus. But grief is part of that. And grief is okay.
mm,
You know I we've already mentioned I had the grief of losing my father in the past year. I've also, longer ago, my wife and I had the grief of losing children on two occasions. These were both pregnancies that were the birth was premature and the baby didn't survive. And those were very hard. And those are definitely times of grief. And a Bible verse, it's really kind of a blink and you miss it Bible verse that nobody ever quotes. But it's I believe it's Acts chapter 8, verse 2, it could be chapter 9, verse 2, but it just says that godly men buried Stephen and wept greatly over him. After Stephen had been the first Christian to die for his faith, you sometimes have this, it's really, I would say, would almost not shrink from saying heretical idea that, when I die, you should all just have a party because I'm in heaven, right? That's not realistic. That's not how we see the apostles living, right? Godly men buried Stephen and wept greatly over him. Um, so God licenses grief. It's okay to be in that place where, like, I'm just having a hard time because this is really sad. And, we get to the stage where grief is the first stage of lament, where through that grief, I look up and I remember that God is good and wise and has a plan for my salvation. But those things are bound together.
Thank you for sharing that. What is love?
Well, love is caring about another person's well-being.
Mm.
I think maybe my favorite Bible verse is in Philippians chapter 2, where Paul says, "Consider one another as more important than yourselves." And then he goes on and says, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus." And he, recites this hymn of how Jesus left behind, the glory of heaven to be a servant for us and to die on the cross. Um, and Jesus said, there's no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends, and you're my friends, Jesus said to his followers. And yeah, to consider others more important than yourselves, to care about their well-being, right? And that means to listen to them. I think a lot of times as Christians, we have this idea, well, I look at this person over there who's wrong. They don't believe the gospel. They don't practice, sexuality the way I think they did, and I'm going to love them by telling them how wrong they are. Speaking the truth in love, that's in the Bible. But I don't think you really can love a person if you don't listen carefully to their point of view before you start telling them about your own.
What is the meaning of life?
Well, I'm a Reformed Calvinist Christian, so I've got to go to the Westminster Confession.
Yeah.
The chief end of
And the
man
man
is to
is
love God
glorified.
and to enjoy Him forever, which is very intellectual and lofty. And I actually like to pair it with the first question of the Heidelberg Catechism, which is, "What is your only hope in life and death?" And I'm not going to say that without crying. So, yeah, I'm going to put those together, right? What's my only hope in life and death? Is that I'm not my own. Right? I don't belong to myself. I belong to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ. And at the same time, my purpose is to love God and to glorify Him and to enjoy Him forever. And that's not like He's some selfish egomaniac who wants who needs all that attention, right? It's what's best for me. It's how I am most truly who I was made to be if I am glorifying God and enjoying Him forever. And that's where we should should be should be aiming. That should be our goal.
All right. On the last question, what advice would you give to young people, especially high schoolers, and
Hmm.
maybe seniors in high school?
Don't be afraid to think. Don't be afraid of anything that you might learn. Because God is good, If there's anything in the world that's true, it's true because God made it to be true. Um, Look for community, look for mentors, look for peers, listen carefully, learn, but also keep your convictions, and be confident that the gospel is true, that there are good answers, and uh, and that ultimately our purpose is to love each other and to point each other to Christ.
Praise be to God. All right, Matt, thank you so much for your time.
This has been really great. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. And maybe we'll catch when you have time and you have some time away, maybe we can bring you on again. Thank you so much. My bad.